Okay, so 9:35. We will start our EU Circular Talks this morning. Welcome. Please let me to introduce myself. My name is Ignacio Calleja. I am Senior Advisor for Circular Economy at EIT Raw Materials, and I am also Coordinator of the EIT Circular Economy Community. It's a pleasure for me to welcome all of you to this new edition of EU Circular Talks. This time, the scope of these Circular Talks will be in Industrial Symbiosis, and this talk is co-organized by the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, the CircLean project, and the EIT Circular Economy Community. Next slide, please. Milda, Alice, please. Next slide. Thank you. So we will start with some logistics about the meeting. Just to inform you that the event is being recorded. You know that we will have several interesting presentations, and after each presentation in the second round, we will have 15 minutes for discussions. So how to participate in the discussions? So if you want to join the discussion, if you want to make a question to the speakers, or if you want to provide any comment, any idea, you have to raise your hand. Once you have raised your hand, the moderator will allow you to join the discussion. So we will give you the opportunity to enable your microphone and your camera. Okay. You can also use the chat during the workshop. You can use the chat also to include your questions, if you prefer to be through the chat and not to participate in raising your hand. But you can also share your opinions, or you can also share information or links in the chat. Okay. Next slide, please, Milda. So I think that we have a very interesting agenda for this morning. We will start with a short introduction from my side. Then we will have Mira Maria Katainen from the European Economic and Social Committee also welcoming you. And then we will move to a very interesting session from the European Commission. We will have three different DGs, DG Growth, DG Environment, and DG RTD, telling us about different initiatives from each of these DGs dealing with industrial symbiosis. Then we will move to another with four good and interesting speakers: Raquel Lombardi, Klaus Sommer, Christian Matti, and Teresa Domenech, telling us about different specific aspects of industrial symbiosis. And finally, we will go for a closing remarks from Christopher Gudler from the European Parliament. So a bit about the EIT Circular Economy Community. This is our first year collaborating with the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Last year, we organized our first EU talks in education, learning and skills for circular economy. And this year, we have decided to go in the way of industrial symbiosis. The EIT Circular Economy Community is a cross-kick activity composed by the participation of 6 different kicks. Okay, so we have EIT Raw Materials leading the initiative, but we also have EIT Climate Kick, EIT Digital, EIT Food, EIT Urban Mobility, and EIT Manufacturing. All of us working together to try to join efforts in some specific aspects of circular economy. One of these joint collaborations between the different kicks is to establish a collaboration with the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform through the organization of these EU Circular Talks. We also have specific calls in this cross-kick action for ETB support or for knowledge creation, and we also have joint efforts to reach external stakeholders to try to organize collaboration in a joint way from all these gigs. Also, I would like to tell you that this EU Circular Talks, this workshop is just the first step of our discussion approach. So I would also like to invite all of you. I know that some of you have already joined, but I would like to invite all of you to join the LinkedIn group on Industrial Symbiosis. So the idea is to have a final document, including the final remarks of this workshop. This document will be shared with all of you in the LinkedIn group, and we will organize also regular discussions in this LinkedIn group. So just now, I would also like to invite Mira Maria Kukkanen to give you short introduction and short welcome. Mira Maria, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you'll give me a minute to share my few slides. Just a second. Can you see my slides?
Yes, no. We can see your slide.
Great.
Okay.
So, is it in a big screen or is it small like it is?
No, it's a big screen. It's perfect.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So, good morning, everyone, also from my side. Before anything else, I would like to thank the organizers for bringing forward this important topic today. My name is Mira Maria Kontkanen, and I'm a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, part of the Employers Group. I would like to start by stating the obvious. COVID-19 pandemic has been a true challenge for all of us. It has first and foremost, of course, been a health crisis, but equally importantly, it has also been an economic crisis. It has forced us all to reflect the ways that we are living and doing things, including businesses. It has emphasized also the need to become sustainable for any future crises that lie ahead of us. We in the ESC firmly believe that moving to more circular economic models would allow Europe to meet its current and also future challenges of global pressure on resources and the rising insecurity of supply. The transition to a circular economy is also essential for building more robust European economy, and industrial symbiosis is an important part of this. We see that benefits of industrial symbiosis can be felt at all levels of sustainability. We see the positive impact on environmental sustainability. We also see the positive impact on social sustainability by new jobs and employment. And then we also see, of course, the economic sustainability that comes through increased global competitiveness of European economy. Industrial symbiosis is by its nature a very collaborative process where different sectors, businesses, stakeholders come together to find a mutually beneficial way of doing things. Recognizing the need to bring stakeholders from the field in one place, the European Commission and the European Economic and Social Committee have launched a joint initiative known as the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform that was already mentioned in the opening statement. And also the Stakeholder Platform is today's co-host. As many of you may already be aware, the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is a European one-stop shop for the circular economy community. It is a place for dialogue and a bridge between existing circular economy initiatives. In fact, all content in this one-stop shop for the circular economy in Europe comes from you, the stakeholders, with the debate continuously being nourished online through our communication channels such as Twitter, LinkedIn, and our newsletter. As the exchange concept of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, the EU Circular Talks that we are having today are the ideal forum for stakeholders to come together and exchange their ideas and practices in specific fields such as industrial symbiosis. This is exactly what the ESC and the Commission had in mind when they launched the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform 4 years ago. A platform is facilitated at the European level, but then it's driven actually by the stakeholders on the ground. And this is why the initiative by the EIT Climate Kick to focus this EU circular talks on industrial symbiosis is particularly welcome. Now, apart from its active role in the stakeholder platform, the European Economic and Social Committee also acts as a driver for industrial symbiosis through its opinions. In its role as a consultative body to the EU institutions, the ESC organizes thematic exchanges with a wide range of civil society actors and prepares opinions on issues related to industrial symbiosis, drawing on input from experts in the employers, workers, and various interest groups. One example of a very recent ESC opinion on circular economy is the opinion on circular public procurement. While public procurement can bring strong benefits for a framework policy, there are also barriers identified which also apply to industrial symbiosis, and they need to be considered. Also, the ESC has a long-standing and crucial role to mobilize and empower civil society networks. These networks also have an important role in enhancing circular economy at the national, regional, and local level. Still, before finishing my welcoming statements, I would like to give a few practical examples of the good practices and projects that we have been able to gather on the circular economy stakeholder platform. The Insight project is an interesting example that aims to develop an industrial symbiosis facilitator that helps transition through the design of a common curriculum and learning approach. The second example on the slide is from the chocolate sector, where two companies have collaborated in the development of an industrial symbiosis system to produce the ecological paper called crushed cocoa from cocoa processing waste. The byproducts used are the skins of the cocoa beans, which is one of the waste products created during the processing of chocolate. The third and last example is from the SME tourism sector that has, as you all know, been very heavily impacted by the COVID crisis. Centaur is a three-year lasting European project that is funded by the COSME funds. It is a strategic opportunity to develop and test innovative ideas to support small and medium-sized enterprises in the tourism sector towards the transition to a circular economy. Centaur promotes innovative solutions for sustainable tourism development and management of tourism enterprises through transnational cooperation and knowledge transfer, in particular towards SMEs that are focused on local supply chains and trying to create industrial symbiosis to develop their circular business models. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will now leave the floor to the next speakers of this event, and thank you for having me opening these talks today. I very much look forward to having an innovative and enriching session with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mira Maria. Very interesting introduction. I really like the example you gave us for industrial symbiosis. So we already moved to the first part of our workshop. As I told you, we will have 3 presentations from 3 different DGs, telling us about different initiatives from each of them dealing with industrial symbiosis. So just now, I would like to welcome Olga Pozlevich from DG Grow. She's going to tell us about a very interesting initiative from DG Grow in industrial symbiosis called CircLean. Olga, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I'm sharing my presentation. Okay, so do you see that?
Yes, we can see that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So good morning once more. My name is Olga Pozlevich. I work in DG Grow, which is Director General for Internal Market and Industry Entrepreneurship and SMEs. And I'm from the unit which deals with green and circular economy. Today, I'm here to present you the ongoing CircLean project, the European Network of Businesses and SMEs for Industrial Symbiosis. It's the European Parliament pilot project. So for those of you who are not aware, pilot projects are normally dedicated to test the feasibility of certain activities. And this is exactly the purpose of CircLean, which is a 3-year project that will be over next year, and it's funded by the European Parliament, and it is managed by DG GROW, by my unit. It is led by the consortium. It is managed by a consortium led by Technopolis Group. So this project didn't start just from nowhere. We had in DG GROW a study conducted on the opportunities of market opportunities and the challenges on industrial symbiosis. The final report was published in 2018, and it revealed certain challenges and possible responses for those obstacles. So what are at that time the challenges that were identified? So first of all, it was realized that there is a lack of favorable framework conditions, both regulatory and economic incentives. Meanwhile, we have a European Green Deal, we have a circular economy, second circular economy action plan. So the importance of the industrial symbiosis was rather strongly recognized already in the legislation, but it's not enough. There is still room for more. And the second challenge that was identified, it's the lack of the reliable data, comparable data, standardized data on the waste streams that could show the effects of the industrial symbiosis, lack of recognition, and is also awareness about the impact and benefits of industrial symbiosis. To deal with that, it was proposed to set up a voluntary common industry-led approach on the reporting of industrial symbiosis transactions, and to uptake of this approach by industry, which normally should lead to everybody's recognized environmental, economic, and social benefits. And this is how we have came up with this project to set up a network that would be EU-wide, flexible, co-created by industry, sustainable, voluntary, need-centered, and evolutive. All those features are very important from our point of view to make the network work. Why we need such a network? So first of all, if we move towards the EU climate neutrality, and we have to increase the measures, circularity measures, and one of them is the industrial symbiosis, which would not only increase competitiveness of businesses, but also foster green growth, eco-innovation, and as I already mentioned, accelerate the shift to circularity. By having an EU-wide approach, this would promote awareness of the market potential and improve visibility of the impact of company sustainability drive. So that makes companies' sustainability claim more reliable and trust. The way we achieve that is we are setting up, as I already mentioned, an approach for the reporting and monitoring of industrial symbiosis transaction based on real needs and capacities. This reporting tool is under preparation currently. I will talk about that later. In addition, we will develop an industrial symbiosis label. It's a label that will recognize the efforts of industry at the different level, that will reflect the different level of the implication of the industry in the industrial symbiosis. There will be a matchmaking tool, and the industry will have a possibility to showcase the result and to prove, to have a certain proof of their sustainability drive. The CircLean network is not only for industry, but also for public authorities, research innovation stakeholders, and business associations. It's rather important to keep all those actors in that network, since we all know that industrial symbiosis is not only about industry, but also about the public authorities. And it's rather important to have also research and innovation actors on board too. So this is the short, the schematical view of what we have achieved and where we are going to. What we have achieved is that we set up the secretariat, and there are already first drafts of the methodology, of the reporting tool, of label and protocol to get those labels. And this is an ongoing process together with the network members. We have already some members. And we are still finally working on that, on those tools and methodologies. Wait a second, apparently I didn't plug my computer in, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Olga, are you there? I think we have lost Olga.
I think she has a little issue with her computer. We can move on to the next presenter, and then maybe we can get back to her when she connects again.
Okay, I will do like that, Alice. Thank you. So then I would like to invite Anita Matic from DG Environment. I think Anita is going to tell us about, from my point of view, very interesting issue, which is the link between Industrial Symbiosis and the Industrial Emissions Directive. Anita, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Let me find my presentation. So I hope everything is fine, that you see my presentation and that you hear me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm Anita Matic, and I work as a policy officer in Director General for Environment. And just for a moment, I'm not sure. Can you just confirm that you see my presentation, because I'm not able to move slides?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see
No
it.
problem. Yeah, we can see it.
But I can't move my slide. I don't know what is going on.
Can you stop the sharing content and try again, please?
Okay, because I can't see. Okay, I stopped and I will try again. Apologize.
No problem.
So
we can see the lessons learned slide, and then
yeah.
Okay.
yes,
And now it should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Apologize
Perfect.
once again. So as I said, I'm a policy officer in Director General for Environment, and I'm a part of the industrial emissions team in C4 unit, dealing with the implementation of the Industrial Emissions Directive and the best available techniques conclusions. And I have pleasure to participate in the today workshop. In this slide, you see the content of my today presentation. I'm going to give a short introduction of the IED and reference documents on best available techniques, so-called BREFs. Then you will be informed on the IED evaluation and the state of play of the IED revision process. And in the third part of my presentation, I will give more detailed overview of potential options that are under consideration under the IED revision and that are related to circular economy aspects. The Industrial Emissions Directive entered into force in 2010, and it regulates more than 52,000 large agro-industrial installations in the EU. And this includes also energy-intensive industry, food and milk sector, waste treatment, waste incineration sector, but also intensive rearing of pigs and poultry. And the directive is designed to prevent, and where it is not practical, to reduce emissions of pollutants to air, water, and soil. The directive is based on an important principle, which is integrated approach. This means that together with emissions, it also regulates other very important environmental aspects like waste generation, resource use, noise, odor prevention, etc. Right? What is very important is that the ID also requires installations that are performing activities in its Annex 1 to operate according to permits that are based on the use of best available techniques. And to identify best available techniques and best available associated emission levels for various industrial sectors, information exchange process, so-called Sevilla process, has been established under the Industrial Emissions Directive to review the BAT reference documents, so-called BREFs. And BAT conclusions that are part of the BREF is legally binding document adopted by the Commission in a form of a Commission implementing decision. And once the BAT conclusions are adopted and published in the official journal of the EU, they become binding for all installations. Best available techniques, associated emission levels, environmental performance levels, and narrative but best available techniques are three different levels of requirements from the BAT conclusions in terms of a way how they are considered in permits by the competent authorities. For example, best available techniques, associated emission levels must be used by the competent authority when setting permit conditions, and emission limit values in permits can't not exceed these levels. While environmental performance levels and the so-called narrative conclusions are used by the competent authorities as a reference when setting permit conditions. Via generalized uptake of best available techniques, we also ensure more level playing field across the EU industry. In this slide, I highlight the main lessons learned from the ID evaluation process that was finalized in September last year. These findings are that the ID has played an important role in reducing emissions of pollutants from industry, in particular to air, and that the major ID success is its governance model, so-called Sevilla process, to collaborate on BREFs. However, the ID has made a more limited contribution to decarbonization and circular economy. The evaluation also concluded that there is not a clear legal status of best available techniques, associated emission performance levels, and narratives, but it was also recognized that substances of very high concern and priority substances could be also better considered in the ID and BREFs. So from this, we see that there is a room to improve and further develop the ID in this area. The European Commission commits to reviewing the Industrial Emissions Directive under the European Green Deal, and we have started work on the impact assessment for both the Industrial Emissions Directive and the European Pollutant Release and Transfer Register, so-called EPRTR register. And the ID review strives not only contribute to zero pollution action plan for air, water and soil, but also to climate neutral and circular economy. So we are now considering different options on how to incorporate and implement contributions to decarbonization and the circular economy, and also how to address findings from the ID evaluation in both the ID itself, but also in briefs and BAT conclusions. And in this table, you can see state of play of both the ID and EPRTR reviews. So we started in December last year with the public consultations. This is now finalized, and we are planning to organize now in the beginning of July a final stakeholder workshop where we are going to present findings of open public consultations, but also of the targeted service consultations. In parallel, our contractors are also working finalizing consultations and interviews with stakeholders, but also in focus groups. So our aim is to have the final proposal adopted in the first quarter next year. One important aspect that the ID revision will look into is how to contribute more to circular economy and resource efficiency aspects. And here you can we list main potential options that are under consideration, and we will be looking in how to address findings on resource efficiency and circular economy through environmental management system that is already included in our BAT conclusions, but we will work on make it more clear and legally binding in terms of requirements. And we were also looking how to better consider the most hazardous substances by also making a chemical management system binding through the environmental management system. Another options that we are considering are integration in the BAT conclusions of the details that are necessary also for the good implementation of the environmental management system. And one of the options that we are also have under consideration in our packages of options is also making best available techniques associated emission performance levels binding. Another group of options is related to promotion of industrial symbiosis, and it is mainly about inclusion of information of chemicals and industrial symbiosis in the brief, and also giving more information and providing for information that can be then used for establishment of for assessment and of possibilities to establish national industrial symbiosis plan. So the main objectives in the idea of the environmental management system and industrial symbiosis is in general to make clear the legal status of the environmental management system, and also to getting operators and management board more involved to reduce the environmental impacts from the installation through continuous improvement, but also to provide more information to possibilities and opportunities for industrial symbiosis. In particular, environmental management system is an important instrument to implement narrative best available techniques, including also elements such as a continuous monitoring and reporting and improvement obligations, and also the involvement of the industrial operators through this process of continuous improvement, but also with links to value chain procurement strategies. The objective of the chemicals management system is to require coverage with the chemicals management system of chemicals of concerns, also persistent organic pollutants, together with priority substances that are regulated by Water Framework Directive. And the chemicals management system would require reporting on chemicals and substances that are used in industrial processes, but also it will strengthen the interface with the REACH directive. This will ensure more updated information on awareness of latest data on chemicals associated with environmental and human risks. And finally, the objective of the ID, objective in the ID of industrial symbiosis is to address better the value chain issues, to address this issue more systematically via the BREF review process, and somehow providing this information will trigger more opportunities for industrial symbiosis at local, regional, and national levels. And the objective also to include more information on BREFs on opportunities for sustainable sourcing and the pretreatment of waste, with the objective to provide also more information to member states to help them to develop and to support them to develop measures on end of waste provisions. And of course, we think that this all also be used to facilitate, all this information will be used also to facilitate consideration on opportunities for national plans and to promote better industrial symbiosis. This is all from my side. I would like to thank you, and I'm available for any questions that you may have later on. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. A really interesting presentation. I think it's really interesting on our side to know how the Industrial Emissions Directive will consider industrial symbiosis in the future. Thank you. So I think that Olga has joined again the workshop. So if you allow me, I would like to invite Olga to finish her presentation. So Olga, the floor is yours whenever you want.
Yes, thank you. And sorry for this technical issue. There are just few slides left. So I stopped where on the slide where I was presenting the process, the ongoing process, and where we are standing right now within the project. I have already mentioned what we have achieved, and the upcoming actions will be to fine-tune all the methodologies with the members of the network. There will be network meetings still this year. By the end of the year, we're planning 2 network meetings. The management board meetings, pilot testing tools still this year as well. And next year, we would like to organize an open innovation workshop. And to finalize the project, we need to prepare a long-term strategy for what will happen after the project will be over. So still some steps to go through. And we need to take care of some critical aspects. And as you probably noticed, there are several ongoing initiatives and tools on industrial symbiosis. So we need to ensure the synergy with all that And for that, we also work closely together with other Director Generals of the Commission, DG Environment, DG Research and Innovation, Joint Research Center, Director General for Regional Policy. We all work together to ensure that there is no overlap and that there is a synergy ensured. The particularity and the uniqueness of the CircLean network is that it's focused on the EU-wide approach for the monitoring and reporting. We absolutely need to have industry on board and to engage with them. And for the time being, the CircLean was not yet fully defined. It's in the co-design approach. And also, the website was not available, but we are launching the website today. So the CircLean online presence will be at full capacity, and there will be more actions coming, as already mentioned. The membership after the end of the project is still under the question. For the time being, it's free of cost, and we need to decide on the modalities to ensure the continuity of the project. How the members can join the network. For the time being, before the tool is available, you can contact Secretariat to request the application form, to fill in and submit it. And when it's validated, you sign the code of conduct and you're a member. And then you can decide yourself whether you want to be just a basic member, to have a basic membership, or to participate more actively in the activity of the network. For the basic membership, you will have just to register your details and resources in the CircLean tool when it becomes available. And for the active membership, you co-create together with members of the network the methodology, the label. You will have opportunity to participate in the workshops and at other meetings. And so I will finish my presentation with breaking news that I have already pre-announced, that today we are launching our website, and we look forward that you visit. It's you see it's CircLean symbiosis.eu. You're very welcome. We will post the tweet once it is happens. Thanks a lot for your attention. Sorry once again for some technical hiccup, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Olga. I really believe in this CircLean project, and that I hope that in the future CircLean will be one of the main Commission tools to support to enhance industrial symbiosis in Europe. So I will invite all of you to join this interesting network. So we move to the next presentation from the European Commission, and in this case we will have DG RTD telling us about a new flagship initiative, which is Hubs for Circularity. I think it's finally, Jürgen is finally not able to join us today, but we have Dominique Planchon to give us this interesting presentation. So Dominique, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I hope you hear me loud and clear.
Yes.
Trying to share my presentation right now. Okay, do you see it?
No. Si vous avez deux écrans, Madame Planchon, choisissez l'écran numéro 2 si vous faites un partage du document en faisant partage d'écran.
Oui, mais pas l'option pour l'instant.
Le document est ouvert sur votre laptop?
Oui, 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 oui.
Alors vous faites en haut à droite le carré avec la flèche qui va vers le haut à côté du micro. Faites Share Content et ensuite vous choisissez Windows et vous sélectionnez votre document. Voilà, merci. Comme ça, c'est parfait, on le voit très bien.
C'est parfait, ok.
Oui, merci.
Ok, donc je démarre. Donc je travaille pour la direction. I'm working for the Directorate General RMI in the Prosperity Directorate that is working for industrial transition. And I will speak about this new initiative and its place into the work program Horizon Europe. Okay, it worked. So that's really concerning Cluster 5. You know that Pillar 2 in Horizon Europe is separate in different clusters and into this cluster into different destinations. Here it's Cluster 4 for digital industry and space. Which political priorities are, of course, the Green Deal, which is really overarching everything, the recovery plan for Europe, Europe fit for the digital age, and the European industrial strategy. As our president said, Europe industry is the motor of growth and prosperity, so essential for. The vision in Cluster 4 is articulated in 3 different strategic orientation. First one is climate neutral, circular and clean industry. Second is the industrial and digital transformation that is supporting the first orientation. And the last one is really the major contribution to inclusiveness and resilience. So engagement with user, worker, and citizen, development of skills, development of regions. And with that, we hope to achieve the twin green digital transition. I will go a bit faster. So we have several partnerships that support us in this work. And concerning industrial symbiosis, we have 3 partnerships involved. First one is Process for Planet, which is concerning the energy intensive industry and the chemical industry. We have Clean Steel, low carbon steel making, and Made in Europe, dedicated to manufacturing. I'm really leading the section of for apps for circularity. So the goal there is really to achieve a stepping stone towards climate neutrality and circularity. In the next 4 programs, so 21, 22, we have 3 topics, including one CSA. So one support action for a total of 70 billion. And we have a big objective for the whole Horizon Europe is to achieve 5 running hubs for circularity by 2026. What is this hub for circularity about? So it's really first of a kind lighthouse demonstrator plans of near commercial size. So very big and ambitious projects that should deliver on carbon neutrality, zero waste to landfill, water management, and global competitiveness to globally achieve the goals of the Green. This is part of the Process for Planet roadmap. So very we developed like very closely with industry, and the goal is also to include all stakeholders. So starting from process industry, SMEs, waste association, waste management companies, local authorities and regional authorities, very important, that should engage into this project, and the civil society. We developed that based on expert recommendation, and to cite the report of Klaus Sommer that you will hear later in this morning, that make a study on the project we developed in H 2020 Industrial Symbiosis. So the expert achieved some conclusions that we need some KPIs dedicated to measure and monitor the progress in the symbiosis. And also we need some symbiosis readiness level that are called SML. You see the scale here on the right of the slide. And well, of course, should be supply-driven business model developed. If there is a big need of facilitation, you will see later what we think about that. And it should start with already cluster group of companies in local proximity. Can be regional, can be around cities, but that should be really the core of the development of such hubs. And also industrial symbiosis should apply to all different sectors. So not only process industries, but all related sectors. So what's our planning in Horizon Europe? So the first phase I already spoke about will be normal goals. So one research and innovation action, one innovation action, and one support action. In the later phases, phase 2 and phase 3, we will concentrate on funding hubs. Would be still traditional course, but in parallel, we will fund hubs for circularity of really full scale. So for the very next 4 programs, so in 2021, we will have the first research and innovation action deploying industrial urban symbiosis solution for the utilization of energy, water, industrial waste, and byproducts at really regional scale. It's of course a project that will be developed under the umbrella of process component ownership. And really what we expect for outcome is deploy real scale exemplary pilot solution of industrial urban symbiosis concept, making flow of energy, waste, and water circular, achieving near zero greenhouse gas emission and near zero water distribution. Of course, coupling with that, a reduction of 50% of industrial waste generation, and of course the reuse of these waste or byproducts. Not downgrading, but using them as new source for raw material. So the other project we will fund in 2021 is the Community of Practice ECOP platform. The ECOP is really a tool that should connect and centralize all the information concerning industrial symbiosis and circularity that could really serve our project, but not only, all development of industrial symbiosis project from all kind. They should install a network and connecting with all existing initiatives, as you saw earlier, like CircLean, for example, but there are others, and the platform also that was described very early this morning, the ECESP platform. All these kind of tools should be centralized and really connect into this support action. And the project will really embrace all existing hubs for circularity, but also like really starting ups and ups at all stages that already exist, that want to develop more, but also the ones that are only in gestation project and that start and so the work program is really published today, so it's brand new. And we will have the info days here. You have the planning, and our info days concerning cluster 4 is on the 29th and 30th of June. So please register. You have the address below, and that will be a very interesting event. And we will have open questions for all the people. These are our next steps. Of course, the Horizon Europe calls that will be implemented, but also an awareness campaign that will take place in the second part of this year. We plan to really start very close collaboration with the GRC, with the CCI initiative, Circular Cities and Region. We will also establish synergies with regional fund to reach into regional authorities and have direct discussion with the general authorities talking that is planned in September 2001. And also cooperation with EIT and EIB that are already started to help additional fundraising for future circular. If you want more information about this initiative and be part of the community of interest, there is a page dedicated on our website, and you see the address here. So it's for your attention, and I'm open for all your questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dominique.
Yeah, I will stop sharing.
Thank you. I have been said by our colleagues taking the technical issues of the workshop that my camera is taking too much weight. So I have been recommended to use only my microphone from now. So I will do like that. So I would like to move quickly to the next presentations, but we have one interesting question here, and I would like to invite Anita, Olga, or Dominique to respond. And we have one participant specifically asking whether economic policy instruments have also been considered as part of these policy options. So Anita, Olga.
Yes, I can start. Others maybe can complement if they have something to say. I suppose that this is related to the IED revision. We are in the process of the impact assessment, and we are considering different options, and this is ongoing work, and I believe that this will be also assessed in the impact assessment for sure. So, but it is still, as I said, just like process ongoing, and I can't now say to what extent this is included. Yeah.
Thank you. Olga?
Yes, just to add, it's a very good question because, as I mentioned, the study has revealed that economic incentives are a very important part to increase the uptake of the industrial symbiosis by businesses. But it's also probably one of the most sensitive parts, so we need to take it carefully. And as Anita mentioned, wherever we put as economic incentive, it should be in the legislation. So from the side of DG Grow, from the side of CircLean, for the time being, we cannot put any. We are not in the context of putting any economic incentives, but it's something that we have in mind, that we are aware of, and it's something that we definitely will need to work to discuss, as Anita said, in the context of legislation revision, of the EU legislation revision. So this is from my side.
Thanks a lot, Olga. I don't know whether Dominique has also something to say here.
Do you? Yes, for the apps for circularity, we are planning that Horizon Europe will intervene only for 20% of the funding. So there will be need of additional investment, additional funding. So we are working hard for creating really synergies between programs with EIT and regional funds, and this will be our work for the next 6 months, and we are taking that very soon.
Thanks a lot.
All I can say,
Dominique. So I think that okay, thank you, Dominique. So I think that the question has been well responded. So we move quickly to the next set of presentations, and now I would like to invite Rachel Lombardi from International Synergies to give a presentation regarding industrial symbiosis, general presentation about industrial symbiosis and main factors affecting successful implementation of industrial symbiosis. I think Raquel, if she allows me to say that Raquel is one of the best options for this type of presentations because she has a huge expertise in industrial symbiosis. So Raquel, the floor is yours whenever you want.
Thank you, Ignacio. I assume everybody can hear me and see the slides. If not, you'll tell me. And thank you very much for the kind introduction and the invitation to participate in this dialogue. I think one of the things that's striking me most about this particular dialogue is indeed the breadth of engagement already. So we're quite accustomed to dealing with or environment or social or economic, and the fact that these conversations are crossing here is critical to the success of industrial symbiosis. So let me see if I can and meet the brief of giving a brief overview. Forgive me, I know a number of you on the call will know a lot of this already. Of course, I have to say that I work with International Synergies Limited. That's our vision on the bottom, our mission, and where we've worked. So the observations I'll be making to you are based on, in my own case, more than 20 years of industrial symbiosis facilitation, training, advising, policy, etc., in economies that literally run the gamut of economic foundation. So this study has already been mentioned, I believe, by Olga, and of course, Teresa Dominic, the lead author, will be on the call shortly. Just to remind everyone that industrial symbiosis really is quite well spread across Europe, and indeed, as you saw from our own map, around the world. So there is some level of IS going on really pretty much everywhere. Whether or not companies call it industrial symbiosis is another question and a challenge. But if we go at it from the various agendas that we're meeting with industrial symbiosis, including circular economy and green growth, of course, resource efficiency, and that is to us one of the primary drivers because of its link to climate mitigation, eco-innovation, and then according to the former Environment Commissioner, Dr. Potočnik, he sees resource efficiency underpinning all of the Sustainable Development Goals, because if we don't have the resources that we need, we can't build even the social systems that will support us. So again, this breadth, I think, is well reflected on this call, which is a treat. Okay, it's just worth pointing out the rising awareness of the size of the prize when it comes to materials and resource efficiency. So this is a 2020 IRP report, but citing details from 2015. Saying that the global emissions 15 to 23% from materials in 2015. So obviously here we are in 2021, those numbers will be substantially bigger.
Sorry, Rachel, I think we have a problem with your presentation. We are only seeing your final slide.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. Let's try again.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
All right, so if I go straight in here, yeah?
Yeah, perfect. Now it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so then we'll go through those quite quickly. That's our world map of where we've been active, north, south, east, west, and the map from the 2018 report done for DG Grow, as mentioned by Olga and lead author of Teresa coming up, yeah? The global agendas that I've just mentioned, again, none of them will have been a surprise to you, but we have demonstrated the relationship with facilitated industrial symbiosis across those. And now the IRP report, again, published in 2020, but with 2015 data saying share of global emissions rising from 15 to 23% in 2015, and that's only increased. So again, that focus on scope 3. I think we're caught up. Is that okay? Okay, I'm going to assume yes. This is a slide that we've pinched from CREDS at Oxford University, which just puts some context to that potential for resource efficiency. And of course, industrial symbiosis isn't the only means to resource efficiency, but it is certainly a very important one to achieve that scope 3. So we've already seen a little bit of this definition. I'm very pleased that it's gained some traction. The 2018 CEN Workshop Agreement on Industrial Symbiosis was a joint project of 4 projects that are listed below, 2 Horizon 2020 and 2 Interreg projects, to put forward a common definition because, as many of you will know, and certainly as a former academic, the plethora of discussion in the academic literature doesn't always give us something short and sweet that we can be consistent about. And so that was the reason for putting this forward. And I know that CircLean at least is working toward this as well. And of course, the point being that we are keeping resources in productive use for longer. But the further point to that is that resources include waste and byproduct and residue. And please, for Anita, those words are all there because we had representatives of from different member states saying, but my legislation is using this word. And so again, that consistency of message for companies that creates the environment for them to be able to advance is very important. The facilitated industrial symbiosis that's been recommended now by the Commission, of course, you'll all know, and I have to start with our own company's example of a national program, and it was already mentioned, working at all levels. So here we have the impacts delivered at 3 demonstration sites within a Horizon 2020 project. The work in Turkey, in particular, won a national award. And we have going on, for another example, in South Africa, a provincial program that's been continuing for 8 years now, working with their local communities as well. So facilitated industrial symbiosis has been demonstrated, excuse me, at the local, regional and national, and of course international, as we even just within ISL have joined up some of our European programs across borders. But we're also seeing more and more the application of an industrial symbiosis approach of measuring flows, matching flows, identifying technologies, waste into byproduct, into product. Approach that aligns. So this is a study that we did in 2013, and we've done a few places around the world now, but aligns very strongly with the smart specialization priority of anchoring to a local economy and creating jobs locally and looking at resources locally. So again, industrial symbiosis finding further application that's developing. This is one of the ones that we did in China, looking at a strategic plan for integrated urban development. So this is what they started with: 25 metro lines, 3,000 kilometers of roads. They don't do things halfway, huh? And then integrating an industrial symbiosis approach into these plans before they all get launched to marry up those opportunities at this kind of scale. So again, the reason for showing these examples is to broaden people's perception of what the implementation of industrial symbiosis looks like. So I was asked to address some of the business challenges. Some will say market failures. Olga reminded us the words framework conditions, and certainly information, because according to our data, 80% of your opportunities are outside your own sector unless you're construction. And within construction, 60% of your opportunities are outside your own sector. That getting access to information is a critical challenge. The regulation and the policy that, again, create that framework structure, either from the carrot or the stick, and of course the commercials and the organization itself. So let me briefly touch on these. This is my absolute favorite illustration of motivating this cross-sector information. Here you see from acton.com, the attributions on the bottom of the screen, the potential use for eggshell components. Now, if I'm a baker making wonderful cakes, how am I going to gain access to knowledge that the calcium in the eggshells is valuable to the pharmaceutical industry for osteoporosis prevention? Or that if I powder the eggshells, I can increase the market value and now access the industrial market? How do I get this information? So one of the major challenges, as well as getting the prices right. Now, we cited an article by Branson, 2011, the Journal of Industrial Ecology. He says, financial benefit is paramount consideration. This is not news. I just thought he said it very well. But in addition to looking for the economic or the financial benefit, we know that businesses are also participating in industrial symbiosis for risk mitigation, reputation management, diversification of their supply chains, and to further their asset utilization. So we can and we do cite the cost savings and the potential revenue generation, but it's also very important to realize that businesses have many reasons for pursuing these kinds of activities. The fair is not equal comment is an observation on some of the calls that are out now and some of the academic discussion. We very frequently encounter as to how to ensure that the financial benefits are, we sometimes hear equally, we often hear fairly distributed. And I would just remind folks that I don't think Amazon or Walmart or IBM worry too much about fair and equal. They worry about their market position and use their market power. So just a caution to recognize that once this is business as usual, it needs to be allowed to be business as usual. Now, there's market conditions to incentivize. Very important, again, already mentioned today. The conditions vary widely, even across the European member states. Now, the graph on the bottom, you don't need to be able to read all of it, but you certainly can look it up. It's just the map across the member states when we were still there. Sorry about that. Typical charge for gate fee and landfill tax. And that distribution fundamentally impacts the market incentive for industrial symbiosis, because if I don't have a cost of disposal, if I don't have an aggravation of reporting, then I don't have a problem that needs solving. So why would I pursue an opportunity other than what I'm already doing? The other thing that we often hear, again, is this geographic proximity issue, and best is just go straight to the data. This is an analysis of, I think, somewhere around 1,000 synergies. Half of them were completed within 21 miles in the UK, but some of the resources that traveled over 200 miles, I think, might surprise some of you, including paper and card, metals, textiles. So again, the value of the resource to business will determine how far business is willing to make those resources travel. And again, it's not something that, in my opinion, we should try to preempt, because business will work it out. And then, of course, there's a number of challenges within the organization, which, we have reading Schumpeter, reading about creative destruction from Foster. We know that we have our leaders, our laggards, and our mainstream, and that will always be true. So how much we can support those businesses is a question. So very briefly, I just wanted to weigh in on the discussion topics that were enumerated in the discussion paper. For the innovation topics, I think that continuing to support the technological solutions to waste valorization is very important. This should be demand-led innovation where the companies are coming and saying, it's costing me a fortune to get rid of this. How do I process it? And that, of course, will be a continuous learning because technologies continue to evolve. The knowledge base for industrial symbiosis, there are thousands of cases in the public domain. The question is, how do we get them accessible? How do we get them communicated? How do we get it so every company is aware of those? And then the funding, which again was also mentioned by Dominique, I think, very relevant, of course, where market fails to create the incentive. And onto the market. Again, the Domenech et al. Study in 2018 for DG Grow identified 73 billion cost savings only. From our experience, the cost savings and revenue generation may be on par. Again, it'll strongly depend on the market conditions or the framework conditions. That reporting procedure that's being motivated in some of the RTD calls, of course, is the primary reason for being for CircLean, establishing a single, consistent European reporting procedure. And those market barriers, and I think Anita also mentioned around the standards, in particular, the byproduct legislation, et cetera. Geographic scope we've touched on. And then you've got listed actions to develop cooperation and trust between industries. And I would encourage the thinking that maybe that could be interpreted as actions to develop independent facilitation, as we know that the facilitation is critical. I don't have to trust the person that I buy copier paper from. Copier paper is standardized. What I need to trust is the standardization process and that business is meeting a standard process. So just, again, a thought for discussion. I'm aware of time, Ignacio, so I'm almost done. On the policy options, again, I mentioned the carrots and the sticks. Certainly the IED is going to continue to build the sticks, but also the carrots. So BREF and EMS give us information that is standard, that can be trusted, and that we can very readily refer to as a consistent playing field. End of waste criteria, I'd like to signpost the work that Emilia-Romagna region is doing in Italy with byproduct sheets that are very simple communications, very clear communications, easily accessible for the companies that say, this formerly waste, now byproduct, is approved for the following uses. It's got a picture, a small description, it's a 2-page document, and very accessible. I think that's brilliant for companies to be able to access. The standards, et cetera, to support secondary materials we've already mentioned. 2 additional things, then I'm done. I mentioned already the smart specialization strategy, again, linking into the local economy, the local flows, the local skills, and building up that way. And then the link that's developing between smart specialization and the European structural funds, I think, is a very important tool to gain further critical mass to impulse industrial symbiosis. But, and we've worked under all of these, yeah, you got to get the metrics right. The Interreg project that developed policy to encourage ERDF for industrial symbiosis also acknowledged that as long as you're rewarding activity instead of impact, you're going to limit your impact. So everybody's got access to these things, everybody's subject to these policies. Let's use what's already out there, but use it in the right way. And of course, Anita, I was delighted to hear a national industrial symbiosis plan proposed by DG Environment. We're certainly International Synergies is advising a number of governments around the world on developing national industrial symbiosis plans. Which I think brings me very nicely to my final slide, which is that yes, we know our methodologies and take-up is definitely increasing. Yes, there are continuing needs for innovation policy and market development, but this is a competitiveness issue for Europe. Europe needs to go mainstream faster. This stuff is literally taking off around the world. These are some of your funders. And we've got a project right now in Uzbekistan, World Bank Group, which is looking at a national roadmap and decarbonizing their industrial sectors. So it's a groundswell. It's very rewarding after 20 years in the field to see this. Yes, I hope I've left you with some things to think about. Thank you. And Ignacio, permitting and time permitting, I'm happy to take some questions now, or I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. Great presentation as always. I don't see any raised hand for questions, and I also check in the chat, and there is no questions in the chat. So please, if you have any question, raise your hands. Meanwhile, I have a question for you, Rachel. I know that you have already told us something about the geographical scope of industrial symbiosis. I believe that when we talk about industrial symbiosis, we don't only talk about materials. We also talk about water. We also talk about energy. So when we refer to water and energy, I suppose that the geographical scope is absolutely key issue. I don't see the point to have water energy share with companies far away. And I also consider that maybe the consideration of waste legislation is also a problem for transport of these materials far away. What do you think about this, Rachel?
No, I think you're spot on, Ignacio. You're absolutely right. So certainly with steam, you're limited by physics. Yeah. So there's no argument there. But some of what some people think of as lower quality or lower value materials still travel substantially. So all I'm saying is that you open the possibility that the market may have a different take on this. Water, the other challenge we have found in a number of countries with water is the complexity of the landscape. So whether the who owns the borehole, or if you have a well, who owns the water treatment? Are you paying separately for the clean water coming in as the treated water going out? What are the regulations between these different bodies that may or may not be this, in the same stratosphere of the regulation? So water, I think, is critical, but also a really big challenge. And they're politically, economically, more than technically. Technically, we know a lot, right? The pharmaceutical industry knows how to clean their water better than what came in. So the idea is then, whose permission do we need to reuse their treated wastewater in power generation? And that becomes very complex. I see some other questions coming in, yeah, Ignacio, but I can't really see them.
Yeah,
so
we have one further questions from one of the participants. Rachel, could you please hand over to us the example of the, I suppose, Emilia-Romagna region in Italy and its by-product sheets? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add something into the chat. It has a link to the TRIS presentation on that, and it has a few slides on what they have and a link to their website. It is in Italian, but of course.
Thank you. And we have one further question. Are there different successful industrial symbiosis approaches based on proximity? For example, 20 miles national and cross-border?
So that 20-mile figure was based on analysis, as I say, of something like 1,000 synergies completed in England, NISP England. It was also validated in the Tianjin Economic Development Area separately. And what we haven't done there, well, what Jensen did in 2011 on the England ones was break it out by the resource so that you can see the maximum, the minimum, and the average distance traveled by those particular resources. To Ignacio's point of energy doesn't travel, water doesn't travel, but a lot of other things can. Which isn't to say that they do, it's just that they can. I don't know if the TEDA article also broke out by resources. And I also don't know if I've quite answered the question.
I hope so. I think so.
Okay, or I'll look at chat when we're moving on.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So we have no further questions. So thank you, Rachel. I would like to move to the next speaker.
Thank you.
And I have to tell you that for me it's an honor to introduce our next speaker, Klaus Sommer. I would say we met some time ago. I wouldn't say long time ago, when he was president of Aspire PP. And for me, it was a pleasure and it was an honor to work with him. And we have today Klaus together with us to give us a presentation regarding innovation related to industrial symbiosis. So Klaus, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ignacio. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation for this workshop today. A tool for the Green Deal, Industrial Symbiosis. And I guess I've been invited by Ignacio because I wrote this report together with others, and we published it last year. There was also a validation workshop at the end of 2019. And I tried to summarize what the community at the time commented in terms of experiences on challenges, for example, and findings for industrial symbiosis. And Ignacio asked me to refer a little bit to what we looked at in the report at the time, and then compare it to some impressions on what is going on in the community right now. I would like to say right away, I don't claim that I know and understand everything, but having worked on this topic intensively, I'm trying to find some helpful comparisons here. The workshop is obviously on a tool for the Green Deal, so I thought I'd very briefly look at what that is. It's improving the well-being of people. It's Europe to make Europe climate neutral and protecting the natural habitat. That sounds like, yeah, okay, that's we've been saying that for a long time. But I have to tell you that I'm really scared when I'm looking at what's going on in our world right now. CO2 prices are being discussed right up to 100 euros per ton. We have heat waves, forest fires, droughts, torrential rain. The ice in the Arctic is only half as thick as it used to be a little more than 100 years ago. So this is not just an interesting topic. It's a contribution that the companies can make to ensure that our planet has a good future. And I think we should not forget. When we look at a very broad analysis, then industry is currently using 12% recycled material, so circularity is not widespread. So it is interesting, it is important to see what industrial symbiosis can contribute to this situation, and it's urgent. It's not just something that's interesting. So in what follows, I'm going to take some of the findings, recommendations from the report and try to compare and reference things that are going on. So I've used slides that others have produced as a reference and then compare it to what was in the report. The first point was that further strengthening research and innovation support and investments in industrial symbiosis would be important. And there are obviously at least two players. One is industry and one is the European Commission, if we look at Europe. So if you look at this is SPIRE, it's processes for planet, as it will be, I think, as of June 23, the new PPP. And there are a number of areas in the work plan, but one is actually the so-called regional approach with innovation areas, industrial and urban symbiosis and circular regions. So obviously the concept here is to say, do we have regions that we can incentivize, that we can nudge towards working together more strongly? And it will be a systematic approach in terms of using these innovation areas in processes for planet, so the new PPP. The second thing is linking these projects with investors and financing, and making sure that the financing options are being used to the largest extent. Now, this topic comes up all the time, but I think many people underestimate how difficult it is to cross the valley of death to make sure you have a commercial demonstration at a TRL of 6 to 8. You bridge the funding gap, and actually you build investor confidence. So to have an example that's something that works as a proof of principle will not make somebody invest money into it. So it is very important to have good links to banks who are interested in funding sustainability projects. And to do this early is very important because many people will be running out of money when they're advancing the project. In terms of methods, tools, and technologies, there are a lot of technologies that are needed. I think Rachel commented on some of them already. So I'm not going to go through the list of technologies here. But piloting and demonstration is one of the ways to increase investor confidence. And for that purpose, as Dominic presented, the hubs for circularity are one approach. And in my opinion, they're pretty important approach because the process industries are at the fundamental place in the pyramid in the industry. And to find hubs where these corporations are being supported and developed is very important. So this is actually a tool to increase investor confidence, because when you can demonstrate something, then that will come. We also said that many different sectors can be included in the industrial symbiosis approach. And I think that is clear also with the examples that have already been presented in this workshop. It's interesting to see that Spire has moved from industrial symbiosis to industrial urban symbiosis, and obviously involving the public sector, civil society, communities is a very necessary approach, because if you do something that is bigger, which is a real hub, then it includes more stakeholders than just two companies trying to exchange resources. Developing a better understanding of the process, I think Rachel also referred to the importance of facilitation. And this is an approach that is maybe not the first one that companies pick. So you have to do a lot of things to make sure that the awareness is improved. And if you look at what we were looking for in a community of practice, then there are a lot of things that need to be implemented to make sure that representation, best practices, the inventory of opportunities, but also education, maybe a reference handbook is available for people who are seriously considering this. Also, tools are very important. A lot of them probably need to be on a digital IT basis. Simulations are necessary. The more important part, I think, here is that if you have the information, it needs to be openly available. People who are thinking about this need to look at the potential. And if they don't have access to information that can help them understand whether there is potential, then they might give up. So it is important that this community of practice creates a common knowledge, a common awareness, and a common availability of information, so the hurdle can be lowered. We looked at a systematic approach of looking at progress in a project. based on the insight that if you don't know where you are, you might not know where you should be going. And I think Dominic already showed the slide, so I can skip over it pretty soon. But I'm obviously happy that this methodology seems to have created some interest, so it's being used in different places. And I firmly believe that it is important to have a systematic approach and understand where you're going in the process. We said include education. My impression, it might be wrong, but my impression is that academia is not that much involved right now in making sure that during the education process of students, for example, the topic of industrial symbiosis is communicated. So this might be an area where we could do more. And then establish portfolio management for clusters of commission-funded projects. This is a variation of what Dominic showed. There are calls that are related to industrial symbiosis and hubs for circularity in particular. That's very good, and that's absolutely necessary. But we also have different DGs involved in the topic. I think this is the last point that I had as a finding in the recommendation. It is essential that the different DGs are working together in close cooperation and alignment. The topic is difficult enough to implement, and I think cooperation is something that is needed to make sure that the topic gets the appropriate attention. So it's very good that the different DGs are here, and I hope this can be expanded. So I tried to summarize everything on one slide. So I have a column for progress, and I have a column for potential gaps. So if we look at the RNI support, I think funding through the European Commission is strengthened, and obviously it's been picked up in the public-private partnerships. Technologies are always a challenge, in particular if you want to do something that I'll mention down here, namely industrial symbiosis by design. So the question is not, I have a waste, what can I do with it, but how can I set up a process that my waste will ultimately be a raw material for another company. So for that, technologies have to be developed. I was quite impressed by what I saw from the Smart Delta Resources Initiative. They have quite some activities on hydrogen, CO2, electricity, heat. So this needs to be done, and it needs to be funded, and it needs to take some time. I think piloting and demonstration, we talked about it. The hubs for circularity are a good move. Financing is important. Yes, there are different initiatives, but I think it's still underestimated. The systematic approach, systematic analysis is important. But I think making data available for people interested is still a challenge. Obviously, projects like EPOS or Scalar are providing data, are analyzing data. It will be up to the community of practice and other activities to make it available for interested parties. Broaden different sectors, I already talked about that. In many ways, the process industry is fundamental. Some of the chemical raw materials are good targets for recycling. So cooperation, for example, with manufacturing of factories of the future, or in the future made in Europe, might be a suggestion. And then the regional approach, we talked about it already. I don't think it's mandatory, but it's usually an advantage, not only because the resources need to travel, but also because people can get to know each other better. To do industrial symbiosis by design, to design the business models in advance, not supply-based. I have a raw material, do you want it? But demand-based. I design my processes such that what I have as a byproduct can be a raw material for somebody else. So this would be a demand-based business model, and I think that's important. Talked about education. I think we can strengthen that. Regulation was a big topic today, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. But make waste value and not just waste is important, and regulations need to allow that. And as I said already, I think it's important to have the different parts of the European Commission work together closely in a sustainable fashion. That should be a daily challenge. So final thoughts are a lot of the things that the community collected for the report that I wrote are being worked on, and there's progress being made, in particular also in concepts and programming and projects. But as always in life, implementation, execution, and ultimately impact are of the essence. So we need to keep at it and make strong efforts, because there are hurdles and it is not easy and it will take time. But I'm confident that events like today actually help very much to broaden the activities, and that makes me optimistic. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope we have a good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Klaus. Thank you for your presentation. Really interesting. As far as I check here, we don't have questions so far for you, but I have to tell you that I miss a reference to the EIT and the KICS in your presentation. I think if you check our project portfolio, we already have many projects dealing with innovation measures in industrial symbiosis. But what we also have, we have a large number of education projects dealing with industrial waste valorization and industrial symbiosis, not only from the higher education side. So we have projects with the creation of new PhD or new masters in industrial symbiosis, but we also have projects dealing with what I think is very interesting, which is vocational training for industrial symbiosis. And at the same time, what we also have really interesting from our side is the specific support for business creation in industrial symbiosis. So we have many startups aiming to support or aiming to successfully implement industrial symbiosis in Europe, supported from our business support corps. So one question from my side to you, Klaus, is that just now we have, I would say that we have so many different sources of support for innovation in this industrial symbiosis. So we have LIFE, we have Europe, we have EIT KICS, we have Interreg. So do you think, or how do you think that it would be interesting to try to coordinate all these efforts?
Well, and I think you touch a very, very good point. The attention to the topic is there. There's no doubt in my mind. There's a lot of activity going on in different areas, but to make sure that this is broadly used as an attractive approach, the coordination of making information available can certainly improve. And I was hoping that a community of practice can do that. And a community of practice needs to be a community of practice that includes practice in all areas, not just in one DG like DG RTD. So the goal should be to involve everybody in hopefully one activity where information is collected. Your point that initiatives in terms of education are ongoing, that's very good. I did not know that, so that's an important point that needs to be added to the information. So ultimately, We need to make sure that the different areas work together. A workshop today is a good start, but ultimately, I would hope that there is one community of practice sponsored by different DGs, for example.
Thank you, Klaus. We have in the chat, we have another question for you from Teresa. What do you think are the main gaps in our current knowledge landscape in terms of industrial symbiosis to enable upscaling?
I'm not 100% sure what upscaling in this context means. What I think is people run their business models. And in the past, the question of, is my waste useful for somebody else, was not necessarily the first question to ask. So as sustainability challenges increase, and ultimately cost of creating waste will increase a lot, and as awareness of the environmental issues improves, the question of how can I design my businesses such that my waste becomes a raw material, that is something that is very, very important for the future. And the awareness of this is not widespread enough. It is not on everybody's mind yet. So the making sure that through events like today, we create an awareness that everybody asks themselves the question, how can I potentially use industrial symbiosis? That, in my opinion, is the most important thing.
Thank you, Klaus. We have another question from Rachel. I think, Rachel, you can make the question directly to Klaus, please.
I can actually see the question, Rachel. So I have opened the chat, so I can read it. So the question is, would I foresee the symbiosis readiness level structure being applicable to CircLean self-assessment module? And not knowing every detail about CircLean, the answer must be yes. And this is a concept. It's not necessarily something that is in any way perfect. It is an attempt to say you need to understand where you are in terms of creating industrial symbiosis to be able to decide what the next steps should be to make yourself successful and to create impact. So yes, this is something that can be universally applied. And the important thing is the spirit behind it, not every word in the matrix. That is obviously can be adapted to the different cases.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it applies to a synergy as opposed to the company itself. And I'd be very happy to discuss this further with you, Klaus, to see how we think about adapting or distilling out the essence, because there is a self-assessment module that goes with the CircLean tool to help companies prepare to use the matching tool. So perhaps we can pick it up again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Klaus. I think that we don't have any further questions for you. So we move to our next presentation. I would like to invite Christian Matti from EIT Climate to give us his presentation regarding policy measures and industrial symbiosis. So, Christian, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. I think all of you can see my presentation now. I think so.
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. So my idea for this short presentation is sharing with you the insight that we have developed as part of an H2020 project Scalar, where we have been exploring the different aspects of the policy developments at different levels for industrial symbiosis. The idea is trying to share the main insights and trying to have some reflections about what are the shortcomings of the current framework and the opportunities for the future. So how we have explored this policy framework at European level. We try to address the challenge of moving from a linear resource and efficient high carbon economy to a kind of a more circular resource efficient zero carbon economy by considering different aspects of the system, including finance, policy, technology, skills, the entire production systems, business model, but also citizen engagement and behavioral change. The idea is trying to address all these elements from the system transformation point of view rather than the incremental innovation elements. The approach for understanding policies was kind of defined by three main levels. That it was kind of an interactive process with the evidence about how we can create a narrative about what we see in the policy framework. So at macro level, we have identified the national, the European, but also the global domains where we can see the collection of EU directives and regulations, but also general frameworks that are shared over countries as part of other frameworks. The attractive meso level is the one that is concerning the industrial park or the eco-industrial parks as a kind of critical level for discussion the implementation of policies. We have identified few policies there, but there is a lot of opportunities that we will see in a couple of minutes. The last but not least is the micro level that concerns individual firms and the actions at the very local level. In terms of policy, there is a lack of policy, but critically, there's no specific policies addressing the influence of this kind of new regulations regarding the different relations in terms of the markets and the services development at the firm level. The overall landscape that we have seen is the last 20 years, and there are three main policy frameworks that has been leading this kind of process. So we have the Environment Action Plan, the number 6 and the 7, but also the Europe 2020 strategy. As part of the first Environment Action Plan, there were significant achievements regarding the introduction of new directives and elements concerning sustainable consumption of raw materials, but also as part of the Europe 2020 strategy, there is significant improvements in terms of new concepts that bring the systemic approach about industrial symbiosis, like, for example, the roadmap for resource efficiency and the innovation action plan. Furthermore, during the new policies and the new elements brought by the Environmental Action Plan number 7 and the European Action Plan of Circular Economy and the Green Deal, a more systemic approach was kind of introduced in terms of understanding the transformation of the system rather than a specific sectorial additions to the existing policy framework. Some general observations from what we have found is that there are 6 thematic areas where policy have direct or indirect influence in industrial symbiosis. So we have some kind of the typical subjects like pollution and waste reduction, as well as resource efficiency. But we include now the issue about material security as part of a logic of global value change and understanding of the long-term development of some sectors and economy. There is a clear inclusion about climate and environmental issues in terms of indications on emissions and climate adaptation and mitigation, especially climate mitigation, and other aspects concerning economic growth, concerning the different elements of new sectors concerning creation of new jobs and new opportunities for innovation, but also the related indicators with environmental benefits. Overall, what we have seen is that most of the normatives that we have identified are related to waste, and in second place we can identify normatives concerning green growth and resource efficiency. While resource efficiency is a kind of a normal path over the 20 years that we have explored, the green growth has been increased after the EU 2020 strategy, so there is a kind of a more prominence during the last years. This is kind of the overall picture about how we can see the current status of the European policies on industrial symbiosis by considering this kind of even like typical line approach. So we have raw materials, production, product design, final product, use, consumption, and waste management. So there is still like a kind of silos in terms of understanding the normatives in different aspects of the industrial sector, but there is a kind of a new attempt with the kind of the new strategies, not still in terms of operational issues, to redefine this logic from a more systemic point of view. And we are going to have some observations on that. So gaps and recommendations on what we have found. So yes, industrial symbiosis is currently not widely implemented. So even when there are some specific sections in the circular economy action plan, so some directives and regulations can provide some clear ideas about the directionality of the policies with strict targets, but still the legislation is focusing more in end of pipe and byproduct type of policy frameworks needs to be kind of further developed. The fiscal policy, such as tax and subsidies incentive, are currently creating barriers for industrial symbiosis because are still considering the kind of the old system and the old structure about the different relations through the value chain. So there is a new there is a need for understanding the feasibility of using subsidies across the value chain in order to have a more concrete impact at system level and not just at sectoral level or at any kind of single stage of the value chain. There are limited knowledge regarding the potential of industrial symbiosis. So this is a particular opportunity that can be addressed by different actors in the system in terms of increasing the capacity building actions for policymakers, but also for the overall ecosystems around each of this kind of meso level that, for example, is the industrial parks that can be a kind of a very clear target group to improve the capacities. In relation with this, the capacity building needs to be associated with the resources to allow people and to allow policymakers and clusters and industrial sector to move forward with new actions and plans. So this kind of platforms concerning the access of information and collaboration is kind of very relevant for support the increasing capacity awareness and also moving forward with some actions on industrial symbiosis. General policy recommendations on this regard is the introduction of a specific action plan or strategic framework for industrial symbiosis, and not as a kind of a subject, trying to move forward with the idea of industrial symbiosis as a kind of a systemic approach to address circular economy in the industrial sector. And that means a holistic approach for policies and the production cycle. That requires also like an update in the status of secondary materials and byproduct definitions and understanding in terms of how the policies can be implemented in a kind of a more feasible way. And in terms of the resources and the incentives in order to move forward with new actions, the fiscal policies need to be actually re-engineering in terms of how they can affect at the kind of the value chain and this industry level rather than specific sectors. Finally, 3 policy recommendations concerning the increase of coordination that is a kind of very normal problems regarding multi-level governance, and now with the concern of the systemic aspect of circular economy and industrial symbiosis, but also the support of skills and capability buildings as part of a concrete directionality on the topic and more visibility. That requires also like having new policy and regulatory framework that endorse from the institutional perspective the importance and the relevance of the topic, and that's going to be a signal for the different actors to actually commit and put more effort and even investment in terms of time and funding to address some of the actions and the challenge that the industry needs to address in order to make industrial symbiosis like a kind of a clear pathway for a more sustainable and smart development in their economies. As part of the report, we have identified very much detail some of the specific aspects that can be improved at macro meso level. I do not want to go to the details of that right now because it's going to be a little bit overwhelming, but I just want to showcase, because this information is available as part of this project, this Horizon 2020 project, and I think it could be a very valuable material for the participants. So there are different suggestions and different mapping on the current status of the policies at macro, meso, and micro. I want to emphasize here that there is also some reflections about how industrial symbiosis can be included as part of the smart specialization strategies, in particular where there is this kind of discussion right now about S4, like sustainable smart specialization strategies, and the different connections with the indicators and the sectors that I mentioned before are kind of a clear bridge between a cohesion policy, territorial development, and industrial symbiosis. There are also some current developments from the Joint Research Center on the concept of industrial transitions that are also very relevant for the potential application in understanding in different sectors and different meso level as industrial parks. You will find also different type of recommendations on that regard at macro, meso, and micro level, with particular emphasis on the meso level, where there is a lack of current policies, but that is more connected to how we can operationalize different targets and directives from the implementation point of view. So it's not just about the translation of the different directives and targets, but it's about creating the capacity and the instruments, what we can say like instrument mix rather than the policy mix, to make it practical and operational, and also to create a space for experimentation regarding how we introduce different practices and different innovative approaches on industrial symbiosis. You can find the different reports in the website of the Scalar project, and I recommend to see in particular for the policy recommendations and analysis the report on EU-wide industrial symbiosis regulatory measures. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Christian. Very interesting presentation. I think that I would recommend all participants to check the link you saw at the end, because I think that those reports from the Scalar project are really interesting, especially the one for policy measures. Let me to check in the chat. We don't have questions at this stage for you, and I don't see any raised hands either. But from my side, I would like to make a question to you, Christian. I think you have shown a very in detail presentation regarding policies and industrial symbiosis, and I would like to ask you whether you consider, I don't know whether there is a response or not, up to you. But I don't know whether the geographical scope of the regulation is also an aspect for this successful implementation. I don't know whether the regional, local policies are more efficient than the international or European ones.
I think it's a very good question, because we need to move more into the geopolitics of the European frameworks if we just think about the European frameworks. And there are two main aspects that I may say that are relevant. One is that we cannot think in circular economy or industrial symbiosis without understanding global value change, and value change that goes beyond this meso level of the industrial park. It's kind of interconnected industries all over Europe. So it's very important to see in some sectors where are these kind of networks, and how this is going to affect, for example, the automotive industry or the chemical industry. There is a kind of a clear understanding of some geoeconomical relations in some particular sectors and some particular value chain. So we cannot ignore that. But if I can have a question, if I can have a kind of a specific example on what is one of the incoming policies that are going to be relevant, the cohesion policy is including this year a particular investment fund on interregional collaboration, and the core is trying to make sense of smart specialization in terms of collaborations between different regions. I think this is one of the clear policy instruments that is trying to bring any kind of elements regarding macro regions collaborations for regional development and potentially industrial symbiosis and circular economy developments by addressing how the different sectors and economies and subsystems can be integrated and supported by the European policy. I hope that can illustrate a little bit partially the answer to your question, Ignacio.
Perfect. Thank you, Christian. Here we have in the chat, we have another question from Klaus. How can newcomers use the Scalar results to identify opportunities for establishing industrial symbiosis?
Thank you, Klaus. This is a kind of a very good question. And I'm going to be honest, I have been working in some particular aspects of the Scalar project, so I'm not fully aware about how I can answer the question about the amount of different methods and tools that the project has developed. What I can tell you is that over the years, the project has developed ready-to-use frameworks, methods, and different information that the user can use in order to move forward with, for example, identification of opportunities or understanding of different areas to reconnect industrial symbiosis, but also different information, for example, this kind of policy reports that can be used to make a kind of a matching with the particular sectors or particular geographies. In any case, the partners of the Scalar project that are going to be available as part of any kind of communication has moved forward in terms of the developments of some actions. In particular, I can mention, for example, the case of the University of Cambridge has invested a lot in capacity building as part of the lesson learned on that, while, for example, Climate Kit has developed a lot in terms of helping regional ecosystems to understand opportunities and mapping opportunities and design roadmaps and visions for further actions. That kind of information is available, including the details of the methods and the evidence base in the website, but all the partners are very much willing to explore collaborating this topic as part of other opportunities. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Christian. So I think that we have no further questions for you, Christian. Thank you very much for your presentation. Really interesting. And with that, we move to our next speaker. Is Teresa Dominic from UCL. She will tell us about market measures and industrial symbiosis. I don't know whether I pronounced your surname in a proper way, Teresa. Sorry. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ignacio, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to talk today and to present some of the research that we have done around the area of industrial symbiosis, including one report that we did for DigiGrow and the environment on cooperation fostering industrial symbiosis. And Rachel mentioned some of the aspects that were discussed in that report, and I will be extending on some of the aspects that Rachel already mentioned. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully it works. Second. Can you all see it? Sorry, one sec. Let's go to the beginning.
Yeah.
So as Ignacio was saying, my name is Teresa Domenech. I work at the Institute for Sustainable Resources at University College London. My main area of expertise is circular economy and industrial symbiosis. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. A really interesting discussions, and I'm really happy that industrial symbiosis is actually taking momentum, and actually people are starting to realize the importance of industrial symbiosis to achieve some of the sustainable development goals, but also some of the climate commitments. As I said before, I will be presenting some of the research that we did as part of a study that we conducted for DG Grow and DG Environment, which I coordinated, but also some of the further research that I have done in this area. And I'll briefly talk through the mapping of industrial symbiosis opportunities in Europe. I will very briefly present what is the current overview of industrial symbiosis in Europe. Then I will talk a bit about assessment frameworks and why assessment frameworks are important. And then I'll also make a few recommendations. So in terms of mapping of industrial symbiosis in Europe, you have seen this map from Rachel's presentation. Basically, this is part of what we did in the study. We tried to map what was going on in terms of industrial symbiosis in Europe. What are the current initiatives in terms of industrial symbiosis? What kind of initiatives are those? Are there self-emerging networks, so networks that where companies have coordinated action to engage in different types of synergies, or are there facilitated networks or planned eco-industrial parks? So we wanted to know where was those initiatives happening, what kind of, or the nature of those initiatives, and also what were the main benefits associated with those initiatives. So what we see with that mapping exercise is that there's a great disparity of industrial symbiosis implementation across Europe. We saw a lot of initiatives concentrated in a few areas and a few regions in Europe, which are traditionally around heavy industrial areas, as you might guess. That does make sense, but also quite a lot of interesting initiatives in Nordic countries, a lot of connections between different sectors, which are not only industrial sectors, but also engaging forestry and agriculture sectors, for example, in Nordic countries. And also some other regions where industrial symbiosis have been less well developed. And we also try to understand why was that? Why did we see more initiatives happening in a few regions, and we saw less initiatives or lack of initiatives happening in other regions? So part of the study was also trying to understand those dynamics. Why is it happening somewhere and it's not happening somewhere else? And what are the kind of framework conditions, which we have referred at the beginning of the event, which actually facilitate the emergence or the development of industrial symbiosis. We also saw huge variation in the network size. So we saw from smaller networks, which were more geographically concentrated on eco-industrial parks or industrial areas, to networks that were really had a really high, wide geographical reach and could include several regions. And I think that the mean size of the networks that we researched were 473 members, but the median was 100 members. That means that we had very large networks, and on the other hand, we have very small networks. We also identified that self-organized activity tended to happen in traditional industrial clusters with primary activity, where there's a large volume of different types of byproducts that are produced, but also in areas where there was a facilitated policy environment. So there was enabling conditions from the policy side for companies to engage in those type of exchanges. And therefore, as the previous speaker was mentioning, the role of policy appeared to have a strong influence in the development of industrial symbiosis networks. Then we also identified that there was, and this something that has been discussed by Rachel in his presentation, that the geographical patterns of the networks, depending on the type of exchanges, the type of resources that were exchanged in those networks. And I'll talk about that a bit later. So depending on the type of resources that those networks were transactioning, the reach was, or the geographical reach will be different. We also identified that the reported economic and environmental benefits from both self-organized and facilitated activity were substantial, but there was also a very clear lack of harmonized framework or assessment frameworks for industrial symbiosis. That means that everyone was measuring the environmental and economic benefits in different ways, using different methodologies. Sometimes it was like a one-off calculation, it was not a follow-up or kind of continuous evaluation. And therefore, it was very difficult to derive conclusions on the overall achievements or the overall economic benefits and environmental benefits of industrial symbiosis networks, because the reporting systems were lacking or were not well developed or were not harmonized, and therefore it was very difficult to compare across different initiatives. So regarding the geographical reach, which I mentioned before, and this is something that I won't take too much time because it has been discussed in few of the previous talks, and also has been discussed or raised by Ignacio about what is the geographical reach of different types of resources. What we found in our research is that, as Ignacio was mentioning before, energy, steam, water, those resources that force there's physical constraints to be transaction or exchange at larger distances. They only happen at the local level, and they are a very important part of eco-industrial parks or industrial area type of initiatives where there's substantial or there's important interaction between local actors exchanging energy, steam, heat, and water. There are other resources where it could the geographical reach could be extended much further. And as I said, it was difficult to have a clear cutoff of different radius because the framework conditions were also influencing the geographical reach. So in some regions, some of the resources were able to travel further distances, while in other regions they had more obstacles to be exchanged at a wider geographical scales. So we saw that at regional level, common exchanges were fly ash, metal and metal products, some mineral waste and waste oil. But also some of the construction and demolition waste in some cases was very local geographical reach, but in other regions that had been extended to more regional areas. And then there was also a number of resources, generally resources where the market is well established and also the value per tonnage is higher, where they could travel at the national geographical reach or even international across countries. Like, for example, in cases of fly ash, some critical materials, for example, cobalt, lithium, and others, or refuse-derived fuel, which you might consider is not a high-value product, but we were seeing evidence that it was actually traveling long distance across countries. So, as I said, that we had very different patterns of how the synergies were behaving in terms of geographical reach across the different initiatives that we researched. As I mentioned before, one of the things that we realized, or we kind of knew, but we also had the evidence when we did the mapping, is that the assessment frameworks for industrial symbiosis in Europe were very much underdeveloped. Most of the initiatives have been evaluated using different indicators, using different metrics, using different methodologies for accounting environmental and economic and social benefits. And therefore, it was very difficult to make a comparison of the performance. So which networks were performing better and why? It was very difficult to understand if we don't have strong, consistent assessment frameworks that enable that cross-comparison of initiatives. And I mentioned here a few international initiatives that have developed recently, which I think they are a starting point to the development of good assessment frameworks for industrial symbiosis. One is the one developed by the World Bank and UNIDO. This focuses on eco-industrial park initiatives, and it focuses mostly on eco-industrial park initiatives in emergent economies in third countries. And it has 4 core main categories. One is around park management performance. The other one is about environmental performance. Another category or dimension is social performance, and the other one is economic performance. And there's a number of different metrics associated with each of these dimensions to measure each of these dimensions. And then there's a system where you can actually assess or even rank and benchmark initiatives according to this framework. This is, as I said, an international framework and only applicable to eco-industrial park type of initiatives. So it's very much focused around industrial areas, so the more local, regional application of industrial symbiosis approaches. The other key initiative, which I think is really, really interesting, and I think in this area, China is actually taking a very strong lead in industrial symbiosis. If we look at the literature, we see that there's a lot of huge amount of case study literature coming from China. China has had for a number of years now, over 10 years, a very strong policy to support eco-industrial parks and industrial symbiosis as part of their industrial development policies. And as part of all that work, they recently, last few years, I think 5 years ago, they initially developed an assessment framework. This assessment framework is a set of different dimensions and indicators, but not only that, also benchmarks for assessing pilot eco-industrial park initiatives under one of the specific program, which is the national program at Chinese level. Well, China is a very complex in terms of industrial symbiosis. They have different types of initiatives at different levels, and this framework applies to pilot projects that have been approved by the national body. So this assessment framework contains 32 different types of metrics, indicators. It also has some methodologies on how to calculate those indicators, but very, very, very interestingly, they also have what they call a standard, which is what we will call benchmarks or performance levels. So it's saying you have to measure all these 32 things across different categories, and you see here the category, well, maybe you cannot see it because it's very small, but it's economic development, industrial symbiosis, resource conservation, environmental protection, and they have another one on information disclosure, which I have not included here. So they have one specific dimension. This is focusing on specifically on industrial symbiosis, but we will see that also the dimension on resource conservation very much tackles aspects related to industrial symbiosis. And they have here benchmarks or minimum levels of performance that they are expecting to be achieved by those pilot projects. For example, in terms of reduction of industrial waste or utilization rate of industrial waste, they said that you have to achieve a minimum of 70% utilization of industrial waste, which is quite an ambitious target. And also, they also mention here, for example, use rate of renewable resources to be higher than 80%, and they consider here waste to energy or energy from waste. So really interesting developments happening at the international level in terms of assessment frameworks. And I'm afraid that Europe, we have lied a bit behind this. Hopefully, this is now being resolved with new project from CircLean and some of the other initiatives happening in Europe. But so far, we have been lacking this kind of consistent and reliable harmonized assessment framework to compare performance of industrial symbiosis in Europe. And it's very difficult to make any policy decision unless you have good data about what are the potential benefits and of industrial symbiosis and what is the performance that you might be expecting from industrial symbiosis networks. So we did an initial analysis of this, looking at the data that was available. And as I said, not all the networks had data that we could compare in any way. So we selected a few initiatives where there was enough comprehensive data and for a number of years to evaluate what had been the performance, in this case, of facilitated networks in Europe. And we saw that for actually €1 of investment in the network facilitation, you were getting huge amount of cost savings, but also savings in terms of landfill diversion, greenhouse gas emissions, water savings, and additional sales and private investment for businesses. So we were seeing that actually investing in facilitated industrial symbiosis networks were providing huge multipliers across different areas, covering both environmental and economic aspects. So here, working with that data, what I did is I created kind of benchmark. I thought that benchmark is something that we needed. We needed to evaluate whether those networks were performing well or not. So I came up with kind of a structured framework for different types of benchmarks for industrial symbiosis networks in Europe. So here I organized the data that we had from the research on the different industrial symbiosis initiatives into low performing, medium performing, and high performing networks. And what we saw here is that even for low performing networks, the benefits of industrial symbiosis were quite outstanding. And for medium and high performing networks, it was really, really relevant. So what we saw is, for example, that you could avoid emissions of greenhouse gases, 1 ton of emission of greenhouse gases for as little as €1 in the high-performing networks, or for 6.77 euros in medium-performing networks. So this is really, really a very efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, especially if we compare it with other things. So we look at, for example, solar or wind energy. We see that the avoidance of greenhouse gas emissions in using those technologies might be around 80 to 200 pounds per ton. So we see that industrial symbiosis networks were achieving those reductions with much, much lower type of investment. We also saw that that the landfill diversion for industrial symbiosis or landfill diversion achieved by industrial symbiosis networks was really, really important, that we were achieving or networks were achieving close to 1 ton of landfill diversion per just £1 of investment in facilitation. Again, here, when we look at the economic data, we saw that the cost of diverting 1 ton of waste from landfill was extremely competitive for industrial symbiosis opportunity networks. So we're saying that it was costing between 1.5 and 0.9 euros to divert 1 ton from landfill. And again, comparing this with other options is a really, really cost-efficient way to reduce waste from landfill. Again, this was compared with what will be the cost savings associated with those environmental benefits. And we say that the cost savings associated with industrial symbiosis in terms of carbon or avoidance of carbon taxation could be in the region from 1 to 6 euros, depending on the performance of the network, or in the case of landfill of landfill tax avoidance, we also were seeing benefits that were ranging from 50 to 81 pounds for medium and high performing networks. So this table, beyond how accurate the data is telling us that actually we can achieve environmental benefits using industrial symbiosis in a very, very cost-effective way, especially if we compare it with the alternatives we have. And also that there's potential benefits for businesses in terms of avoidance of taxes, and therefore potential economic benefits for companies to engage with industrial symbiosis, and those are really relevant. So building on that, what we did is, okay, we have looked at these initiatives, we see that they are doing some things, but the scale at which they are doing compared with the whole industrial sector in Europe is still quite niche. So we saw that there was initiatives all over Europe, but the scale of those initiatives compared to the whole size of industrial sector is still quite niche. And therefore, what we try to identify is what is the potential of industrial symbiosis if it will be scaled up to the whole of the industrial sector in Europe. And to do that, I mean, it was quite challenging in terms of doing it methodologically, but we opted for two options or two approaches. One is to identify what are the cost avoidance opportunities for or linked to waste prevention and landfill diversion associated with industrial symbiosis. And also the second approach was to look at what is the potential of the value generated by the new secondary materials if they are prevented to be waste by industrial symbiosis opportunities. And the key thing here is that those approaches are complementary, so you can still avoid cost and you can make new additional revenue streams. So potentially industrial symbiosis might offer both cost of avoidance, but also new value or new revenues associated with secondary materials. So I'll present here the findings from this exercise, and starting by the waste stream potential approach. So here we look at what we did is to map different industrial symbiosis projects, looking at what kind of resources have been reutilized using through synergies, and then try to scale up to all of those resources that are currently going to landfill or incineration in Europe. And what we see from that approach is that there was huge opportunities along a huge range of different type of products or resources to obtain value from those resources through industrial symbiosis. So we saw that around plastics, there could be potential of up to 2.4 billions per year of recovering secondary materials through industrial symbiosis opportunities. In food, from 100 to 425 million per year. Also in around the 2 billion per year of current transactions that could be exploited through industrial symbiosis, which could grow in the future because waste is one of the fastest growing waste streams in Europe. Also huge opportunities for construction and demolition waste, which could range from under billion to 1.4 billion a year. Again, textiles, also very important opportunities there. Put up to 2.7 billion of opportunities or revenue opportunities associated with secondary use of wood. Used oil, again, 1.6 billion, and totally something that could range from 5 to 15 billion potential by reutilizing those resources through synergies that have been proven to be technically feasible. So
sorry, Teresa, but 2 minutes more. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll try to be fast. Then the next approach that we employ, and I said, is complementary to that. So you have that potential only in terms of revenues, but you also have a lot of potential benefits associated with cost avoidance. In this case, we also look at landfill tax, but again, we could also do it for greenhouse gas emissions. So here we also saw that what we did basically is to identify areas or types of waste that currently is going to landfill and incineration, but where there is technically possible to be reutilized using industrial symbiosis type of approaches. And the total estimation is that there was around in the region of 70 billion euros potential savings for businesses associated with engaging in industrial symbiosis opportunities. This is obviously only looking at material resources and not including in this calculation water and energy, which also will be really important drivers for environmental and economic benefits associated with industrial symbiosis. So I'll kind of conclude here, but just to say that there's the studies show there's a huge potential for industrial symbiosis in Europe to be a scale and to bring economic and environmental benefits. Those benefits are associated with technically feasible and technologically feasible initiatives. So there's you wouldn't need extra technology. If there's extra technology, the benefit could be even bigger. And this only includes material resources, but we also have huge opportunities associated with energy and water. So key conclusions, there's a huge market potential, that untapped market potential for industrial symbiosis in Europe. In order to achieve that, we need a policy framework that is conducive to industrial symbiosis. And some of the initiatives that I saw in the presentation this morning from the GRO, especially the one on the Industrial Emissions Directive, are really, really promising in this area. But we also might need some facilitation that might also help to speed up that development. And we also need a clear, well-established, harmonized framework for assessing industrial symbiosis and for better understanding what actually works and what doesn't work so well. So thank you so much. If you have any further question, if you want to follow up some of the research that was done in this study, but some of the follow-up research that I coordinated in the area of industrial symbiosis, please drop me an email or contact me in the new LinkedIn group. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah.
So let me to check whether we have any questions in our chat. It says that there are no questions at this point, and I don't see any raised hands. So yeah, we have a question here. Many thanks, Teresa. It's a question from Klaus. Many thanks, Teresa. Very interesting estimate of the future potential. So what is the current status? You call it niche, I think, and how long might it take to implement a serious amount of impact?
I think we, as I said in the calculation, I mean, we call it niche because, I mean, there's still a lot of untapped potential. Obviously, if we look at the regional impact of industrial symbiosis, it might be significant for some regions. But obviously, the untapped potential is huge, and there's a lot of opportunities that have not been explored. And part of that is because some of the framework conditions especially in some of the countries or regions are not conducive to that. And some of the things that have been mentioned before, I think everyone here is aware of, but things like, for example, cheap landfill and incineration means that there's less drive by businesses to look for alternatives to that. And therefore, countries where we have large amount of landfilling, like Romania or things like that, they have very low landfill tax and landfill gate fees. And therefore, there's very little drive for some of the businesses to engage with that. So the untapped potential there is huge. But even in other countries, even in countries where there's well-established industrial symbiosis history, even in, for example, Nordic countries, there's still quite a lot of obstacles or problems around industrial symbiosis. Still transboundary movements of waste are very, very burdened in terms of administrative permits. And the definition of waste and end of waste is not always straightforward. Some regions have done it better than others. But I think there's potential, quite a lot of potential for the framework conditions to be more conducive towards industrial symbiosis. I think the time is, it depends. I mean, what we were, when we make those calculations, they were based on existing technologies. So as I said, the time will be the time that is needed for the policy framework to catch up with industrial symbiosis and the needs of industrial symbiosis. But yeah, I'm hoping that now there's a better understanding of the potential role of industrial symbiosis, especially to achieve the climate commitments and Scope 3 emissions, that there's going to be a much or a quicker uptake of new policies and policy initiatives around industrial symbiosis, and that will speed up the process. I want to believe that it won't take too long. And I mean, looking also at other countries internationally, we saw that China did it really, really quick. China has transformed it in 10 years. So, I mean, obviously the conditions there are quite different, but I think there's this potential to do this change, this transition fast enough to actually be useful to achieve climate commitments.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. So no further questions. I propose to move to the last presentation of the day. We will have closing remarks from Christian Grudler from the European Parliament. And as far as I know, this presentation is recorded, right, Alice? I think, yeah. So whenever you want, please. Thank you. Sorry, but the sound is not good. I am not listening to the presentation. Sorry. No sound, sorry. At least for me, there is no sound.
Yes, no sound.
No. Sorry. Yeah.
We'll try now.
No sound. No.
Environmental stakes are huge. First of all, let me thank the organizers of this webinar for their invitation. I am pleased to say a few words on industrial symbiosis, a topic that is of high interest for me as Vice Coordinator in the EIT Committee in the European Parliament. In the industrial sector, the environmental stakes are huge. Industry is the largest consumer of raw materials in Europe. Most of the industrial waste is neither recycled nor reused, which posed a real ecological problem. For instance, in France, in 2019, the business and industry sector produced 63 million tons of waste just in a year. The circular economy strategy is one of the main pillars of the European Green Deal, with a specific action plan for circular economy presented by the Commission that should enable a sustainable growth for Europe. In industries, the idea of symbiosis is undoubtedly one of the best ways to achieve a sustainable but still competitive industrial model. The industry sector must be able to turn to the circular economy in order to reduce its greenhouse gas emission and also to reduce its waste. I believe that with industrial symbiosis, we will be able to create a sustainable industrial sector by allowing a large reduction of raw materials utilization. Now the goal is to introduce these evolutions in all industrial processes and sectors, and this will take some time. In concrete terms, we need bridges between industries. The raw material used by one industry should be recycled and reused in another industrial sector. In the best case, this circularity could allow and almost close the loop in terms of consumption. As a MEP very active on energy issues, I am also very interested in the circularity of energy. For instance, it can be energy reuse, with the heat from an industrial being reused to heat homes via a district heating system. But it can also be waste recovery with organic products and materials that are reused to produce biogas. Industrial symbiosis also plays a key role in terms of strategic autonomy. By reducing the need for new raw materials, symbiosis will enable the EU to reduce its dependence on certain suppliers. The aim is therefore to build on our own resources and to repurpose them after use in order to reduce our dependence to a minimum. Moreover, industrial symbiosis approach is not only good for the environment, but it helps to compete in global markets. Indeed, a circular economy offers a promising opportunity for economic development and new jobs. To foster the rapid development of industrial symbiosis, the Circular Economy Stakeholder platform is a key tool, and I want to congratulate all the actors for their work. It helps to disseminate good practices, raise awareness about new findings, and highlight concrete circular economy strategy. Finally, I want to underline how the platform is useful for companies to better understand the existing economic supports for professionals wishing to develop circular economy in their activities. So I hope that you had a fruitful conference, and we will have many progresses on industrial symbiosis in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you for these closing remarks. So we have reached the end of our EU circular talks in industrial symbiosis today. I really hope that the presentations and discussions were really useful for all of you. So I would like to thank all participants for joining us today. I would also like to thank all the speakers for their interest, collaboration, and work to develop the presentations. And I would also like to thank especially Alice and Milda for their great collaboration in organizing this event. So from my side, nothing else, just to remind you to join our EU Circular Talks in Industrial Symbiosis LinkedIn group, because as I told you, this is only the first step of our discussions. We will continue these discussions in the LinkedIn group, and at the end of the year, we will develop a final document providing the main outcomes of this workshop together with the main outcomes of this discussion group in LinkedIn. This document will be shared with all of you. So from my side, nothing else. Thanks a lot. I hope to keep in contact with all of you in our LinkedIn group, and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.